going to take a look inside what is called the E-box or electronics box on a BMW E46. This is where your engine computer is going to be, along with fuses and relays and other connections. If you have an automatic transmission, this is where your automatic transmission control module will be as well. If you need to check wiring between certain engine components, such as the purge valve or the throttle, or let's see, vanos, everything related to the engine computer itself, this is where you're going to go to check the wiring between the engine computer and the component that you need to check. It's actually pretty simple to remove this cover. You need a 5mm Allen, which I have set up here, 5mm out of my little bit set right here, and you need to remove 1, 2, 3, 4, and then down in here it's actually held into a little retainer. Now this retainer here is correct. This one is correct. The one in the middle, let's see if you can see that. But the one in the back is actually not secured correctly. So I haven't opened this yet. But back there, water could actually get into the E-box and cause some damage. So you want to make sure that this is seated correctly. You don't want water to actually get into your E-box. It would be a pretty expensive repair. Now on a 5 series or a 7 series, the E-box is actually over on the passenger side, underneath the microfilter housing. You actually have to take the entire housing off, and the E-box is actually located in the wheel over in the passenger side corner. Let me go ahead and remove these by hand. I'd use a little bit of excessive force on this one, but I guess they haven't been opened in a while. They haven't been loosened. It did pop free though. I've actually seen the bottom retainer start to spin, and a lot of times then you just have to work it free, and then there's like a metal insert that comes off the bottom. You can actually reinstall it. I'll get a shot of that. So just lift this end up and it pops off from the retainers here on this side. Now, as you can see, I didn't take the bolts completely out. They can stay in partially. You just have to remove them about this distance right here, and on this little end, the pointed end, there's no threads. Now you can take them fully out. This is like a sleeve insert in here, so I've seen that fall out. You can actually push that back in, or if you use a heat gun, you can push that back into place if it does come off on you. Let's see. Let me get a shot of that retainer that's in the E-box housing itself. This is like a metal ring. This is the part that has the threads in it. And I've seen these actually pull out. Oh, there goes my clip. Right out of the housing sometimes when they don't want to break free, and they'll just spin and separate right from the plastic. So if you use electric tools or air tools, if you continue to spin it, it'll actually separate, and you can actually take the cover off. Then using a vise you can separate this bottom part, and then it won't want to go back in. But if you heat it up and then use a punch or something that's larger than the diameter or a socket, with heat you can actually insert this back into the plastic, and it'll actually stay pretty secure and then form right to the plastic. So inside the E-box, this here is my engine computer. I don't have a transmission control unit because this is a manual. It would actually be installed right here in this empty slot. This little black fuse box is actually a very important set of fuses right here for the throttle and engine power, and I've seen these fuses when they fail can be very deceiving, and a lot of people forget to check this. And then I have two relays right here. I believe one's going to be my fuel injector relay and one's my DME main relay. And then back here, when you see this tall brown relay right there, that's my wiper relay. If you want to remove one of these relays, down inside on the side of the relay is a little black clip. You go on the back side of the clip and just pry outwards. That releases it, and then the relay should pull up the housing. Let's see. It's going to be stuck, of course. Yeah, there we go. There we go. Now this whole housing did lift up, but it does kind of float in the E-box. You just have to reposition it so it sits flush. There's these little plastic tabs right back there that sits on. You can see right there. And the relay did come free. Now usually the wiring here is very tight, but it does free it up so that you can do some checking. It actually just slides back down. You can see the relay is held on by a clip here and a clip on this side. So to remove the relay, a lot of times you have to play with that clip. And this is the relay removed. So I could do some checks right here if I had to do some power checks. Could jump the relay, can activate the relay. Just took a look at my wiring diagrams for this E46, and usually this green relay is your DME main relay. However, on my vehicle, because it's a 99, this is actually the fuel injector relay, and this blue relay is my DME main relay. And I found that by checking the wire colors, because you can't really tell in the pictures. But there's a red, white, and a brown. That's this one here. And then my injector relay had some green wiring on it, and that's what this one is right here. So actually on a 99, this blue relay right here would be your main relay, and then it looks like this is the injector relay. Now most of the time this is your DME main relay. I think some cars, if I remember correctly, do not use the injector relay on the later model, or it might be an automatic that doesn't use the injector relay. It actually, I believe, goes all through your engine computer. Now I'm going to remove the engine computer. Make sure you have your key off and it's been off for at least 15 minutes just for safety. You can disconnect your battery. Now when you remove your engine computer, it's going to be the same thing for your transmission. You have to remove these in an order. You can't take a middle one off by itself because of the type of connectors they use. This right here, it just has a push style lock, and that comes out like that. You really can't mix these up unless you know, these two end ones are the same, but all along here these are going to be actually all different. So it has a push tab, and it's one of those slider style connectors. So once you release the tab, slide it down, it lifts it right up for you. You can pull that out, and you're checking for any kind of corrosion. I've seen oil wick up because of a failed sensor and damage a DME. I've seen coolant wick up from a thermostat, map thermostat from it melting through the thermostat, and then under coolant pressure, normal engine pressure, it actually pushes the coolant up through the wiring to the engine computer. That's not very common on the N54. It's usually common on the 8-cylinder. So that looks nice and clean, and you can see it's actually a different size connector, so there's no way I could install that there. Alright, with all my connectors out of the way, I have these two tabs right here, and that's actually holding the DME in place. So I'm going to push this tab back and lift this up hopefully enough so that that tab can't catch. Try to do the same thing on this side. Use something to lift this up a little bit. So up the pressure. Usual for these to fight you sometimes. Alright, let's see. Use a screwdriver. Let's see if I can put pressure on that. Push that back. There it comes. Alright, got past that one. Past that one, just pushed it back a little bit. Here we go. Alright, so that's removing the engine computer. Remember to check your pins, make sure everything looks clean. If it's an original engine computer, it's going to have the VIN written right here. Now if you're replacing your engine computer, usually when you program it, you need a program and a part number. And on these original engine computers, they have the part number, which is right here, which ends in the 848 for this DME. That says 844 there. Well, actually I think that's the program number up here, the top one. Yep, 844. This is my DME number right here, 844. So that 844 number right here is my part number, and I believe this number up here is the program number, but you know, sometimes if you wanna, if that's not working, try the other number on the bottom, but I'm pretty sure that's going to be it if you have programming capabilities. Now if you're trying to figure out what DME version you have, because they're all different versions depending on your engine, if you're an automatic or not an automatic, you can actually look right here. This is made by Siemens. This is a DME MS42. So if I looked up the repair instructions, it's going to list MS43, MS and different numbers. So I could look it up by an MS42 number, and then I know I have the right DME wiring from my car. I'm going to slide that back in. Now, a DME control unit is married to the car, which means you can't swap it from another car. I'm going to just pop these back in. I have to go in the specific order. Push it in, and then bring the lock clip up. There's that one. Where'd my other connector go? Here it is. If you're having some strange engine problems, it's always a good idea to take a look at the engine computer and make sure everything is clean in here, secure. Thankfully no water's gotten in here, although that clip in the back wasn't fully seated. Now pay special attention to this guy right here. That's that fuse holder I talked to you about. Same thing, push it back here, it has a retainer clip. They usually either push up or down. That takes it off the housing. What I want to do is actually take these fuses out. There's a little clip at the bottom here in the front. Let's see if I can get that to come free. And then it's going to come out as like a block. Come on. Make sure you can see this. Yep, actually that's the clip right there that's holding me in place. Got to get that to bend a little bit. It's an older car, so everything's a little tougher. There we go. This is that fuse holder. Actually the top comes right off. Now you have to be careful when you're testing these. If I just use the test light and I checked across the top here, which you can because you do have access to the fuse right in there, so you can check them with a test light. I recently had at work, was helping a technician with an issue car where his throttle wouldn't adapt. Now every time he cycled the key on, you did not hear the throttle do a sweep. Usually whenever you turn your key on, the throttle does a self-check, it does a sweep, it does a readaptation, and then you can start the car and you're good to go. What was happening is you tried to start the car, it saw the throttle wasn't sweeping, and then the car would not run correctly. And he had checked all these, and he had power, both sides. It's good. What was happening in that particular case, and I'm trying to remember, I think, if my memory serves me, I think it was on an E60 5 Series with an N52, and he had some Vanos faults, and then also ended up with the throttle fault. You know, he checked both sides of these and had power on both sides, so ended up replacing the throttle motor, still had the same problem. Now, what I ended up doing, because I've seen this before, is I took this fuse block out and removed each fuse and inspected them. And sure enough, there was, I think it was a 20 amp fuse, which actually right here, this 20 amp fuse, I'm going to assume it's probably the same. This middle one here is probably responsible for your throttle and the throttle adaptation. And I'm pretty sure it was that fuse, that 20 amp fuse that had open. Now, why did he have power on both sides? The reason was, if you look at the wiring diagram, that circuit also fed another component, and that component, when it's not activated, because the throttle shutting down, it was not activating, you have voltage potential. So you actually have voltage potential coming back through the line to the other side. So it would light a test light, but that's only because a component was not activating. Once a component is activated and the circuit's pulled to ground, that voltage potential is used up. So once the throttle sweep did not go through, you have voltage potential, so it looks like a good fuse. It's very, very deceiving. So if you ever are questioning a throttle adaptation fault, take this fuse block out and remove the fuses. Now, it's easier said than done. You have this cap on top, and this top never wants to slide off. So usually you have to do a little bit of braking to get this off, and now the cap holds everything nice and tight when you reinstall it, so you don't really need to worry there. There's some tiny little tabs that hold everything in place. There's a lock on top right here, and then on the bottom side too, back here you have a lock, and right here you have a lock. So you have to get in there with a pick and kind of lift it up on this side. I usually just kind of crack it a little bit here, lift it up a little bit over here, and then push this retainer tab down. Sometimes this is going to crack anyways just because it's brittle, and that'll slide this top off. So I have this top one. Make sure I push that down on top. Still doesn't release it. And then I have these two back ones I showed you. This pick isn't the best one, so maybe I can get it with my test light. I can try to push this tab down here. Just try to lift that up a bit on both sides. Usually it takes a little bit of effort to get these open. Yeah, still doesn't want to go. Make sure I've gotten this one. You know, don't completely crack it open because you want to make sure that these fuses stay in place. So you do have to take a little bit of time and okay, see how I lifted that up? Let's see if I can get this side without stabbing myself. If you have a 90-degree pick handy, this usually works a lot better. Just gotta finagle that. Let's see. Careful too, because oh, here it comes. I moved a little bit. Usually when these fuses come free and this cap comes off, you're gonna have them all go flying. Here we go. It's coming. Yeah, I'm going to lose that 30 amp as I try to get the rest out. Alright. Something's still holding that up. Yep, it was actually that top one. So now I can slide this off. Just like this. And again, all I did was lift up underneath towards the front and lift up the slider a little bit here and here for this lock, and then make sure that this lock right here is pushed down, and I can go ahead and open this up. And this is going to give me access to the fuses. And you can check each one and see that's a good fuse right there. And I could probably recreate the same problem. This is the fuse that was causing the problem on that other E65 series. Put that fuse in, turn the key on, don't start, shut it off, turn the key back on again, hear the throttle sweep, car started right up. Now, what caused this fuse to blow? That's the question. This fuse was for the throttle, so he did replace the throttle. It was most likely the throttle that caused the fuse to fail because he didn't have any other wiring issue. So, replace the fuse and the throttle, and the car has not come back. So remember to physically check these fuses. It's really important. When you're done, lock that back on. Actually, it still locks, which is nice. And install it back into that black housing. Other relay back in. Put it back up. Lock that into place. Jeez, the wiring's tight on these. It's almost not enough to hook it back on there. Alright, make sure that these grommets haven't pulled out. Obviously these lift up if you need to replace the harness. Alright, and then you would put the cover back on. Alright, make sure to get these into the housing correctly in the back, the retainer. Usually if you have it at a slight angle, you can get it into the clips. There's that one. There's the back one, there we go. And then push it right down and get one of these started. These don't need to be super tight, just snug them down. If you are getting a leak into your E-box, check the cover. The cover has like a little integral seal. I've seen on a couple of cars that the covers need to be replaced because water is actually getting into the E-box. The water would actually run a certain along the top of the box and then drip right onto the engine computer. I believe that was on 5 Series E60 as well. That's a quick look inside the E-box on an E46. This is a manual trans, so I didn't take the automatic transmission. I don't have an out module out, which actually, if you looked at it, actually has some blue connectors on it for your automatic transmission module. On later model BMWs, you don't have that external module. It's actually integrated into the transmission called the mechatronics. In this video, I'm going to go over removing and installing the purge valve, which has also been called a vent valve or a charcoal filter valve, and they actually name it multiple different things depending on what wiring diagram you're looking at. Basically what this unit does is it activates with the engine running and your charcoal canister, that when you refuel the air is displaced and you have to capture the hydrocarbons which are stored in the charcoal canister. Then once certain parameters are met, the engine is going to turn on the vent valve, engine computer, which is actually right here. You can see this is the connector, and that's going to go ahead and cycle the hydrocarbons or unburned fuel into the intake manifold, and then it'll be burned up during the normal combustion process. I've recently gotten a question about code P0444 evap purge control valve, and that is the purge control valve. So realistically, the only thing you can check is power. Now the DME, the engine computer, is what activates this valve. So the switching unit is actually inside the engine computer itself. This is the wiring diagram for the M54 engine or M52 TU. What's interesting is that this diagram is basically the same for a 5 Series and an X5. The pins are the same. The only difference is on the 8-cylinder M62. The fuse is actually fuse 1 instead of fuse 2. So right here, this is our power supply. It's a 30 amp fuse. It's fuse 2, and this is located in the fuse carrier in the engine electronics box, which I've just recently done a video on some of the items in the engine control unit box on a BMW 3 Series. This feeds pin 1 at the fuel tank vent valve. That's what they're calling it in this wiring diagram. And this is the activation side. And terminal 31 means ground. So this is the engine control unit, and the engine control unit will switch ground to activate this vent valve. During normal operation, you can hear it clicking or ticking as it opens and closes, and allows the intake to suck in the hydrocarbons from the carbon canister. Now some of the checks you could do would be to check the fuse itself. You could check your wire, or you could check it here right at pin 1 with the key on. you should see battery voltage with the key on. And then if you checked it with the purge valve still connected at pin 2, you should also see voltage coming through the valve. And then if you checked it at the engine control unit, if you could back probe it at connector X60003 at pin 42, which actually this is the same pin for a 5 series and E46 and X5. It all is the same pin, same connector. This is actually the location of that and the way it goes in for the engine control unit. So basically this would be 60001. This is 2, 3, 4, and 5. And according to the diagram, you'd have to check it at 3. So it would be that third one in right there, and you can see this is that tab. So you'd start on this end, take that one off, 5, this one come off next, 4, and then you'd have access to the third connector right there if you wanted to check the wiring. Now if you don't see voltage, you have voltage here, and you don't see any voltage back here at the DME, you could check your wires between pin 2 and pin 42 and see if you have an open. You could ohm this out, you should have good continuity. You could check it for a short to ground, which actually that would be causing the purge valve to activate if it's on this leg. I would say the most common failures that I've seen, I have seen the purge valves fail, and I've seen the fuse be open. So you always want to check the fuse and check your power, and if that's good and you're getting the evap purge control valve malfunction fault, you can go ahead and do the valve itself. But it's also common to get a leak, which I think is going to be the P0444 fault for a purge valve malfunction, which is relating to a minor leak in the system. The way that the system works, it's also monitored. It runs a self-test by pressurizing the system. It can use an LDP pump, leak diagnosis pump, which runs off a vacuum that would run with the engine running, and it checks the system for leak tightness. Or it could use the DMTL version, which is an electronic pump which pressurizes the system and checks for leak, any kind of leaks. So you have to be careful. If you are getting a minor leak, obviously check your gas cap, check the sealer on the gas cap. But I have seen mice chew the top of the fuel pump and some of the fuel lines on top of the fuel tanks and on the sides of the fuel tank. One of the best ways to find that is actually to do a smoke test of the fuel tank system and have the seat out and look for any kind of leaks. I'm going to move forward and remove that vent valve. It's not that difficult a procedure. On my E46, you have to take this snorkel off here. So just pull these plastic rivets out. That'll separate. To take the engine air filter out. With the filter housing out, it really does give you good access to the vent valve, which is located under the intake manifold. That's it right there. That's actually the electronic connector. The connector has a little push clip on it on the back side, and that releases it. And you have basically just power and ground, 2 pins. The purge valve is actually just pushed into a metal retainer clip right up top here. So if you wiggle it free, a lot of times you can just pull that rubber housing off. Let's see if I can get this. There we go. It just pops off like that. Now you have 2 hose connections on this purge valve. One obviously feeds the intake manifold, That's this back one right here, and it goes all the way underneath and actually plugs in underneath the intake manifold. If you yank on this too hard, you can actually pull that right out of the intake manifold underneath, which is really a pain to get to. You have to take throttle out, and sometimes you can actually get in there, pop it back in. If this line does come off, a lot of times you have to take the intake manifold off really to get to it. So use some caution when disconnecting this back hose. Then you have this other hose, which is your feed from the charcoal canister. On my E46, it goes right to a connection right over here, and then down underneath the vehicle back to the charcoal canister. Now that bottom tab right here is actually a push pin that you push down to help you spread out this connector so you can disconnect it from the purge valve. Hopefully I can do that where you can see it. So hopefully you have this, or else you have to use a 90-degree pick and kind of work your way around the top of the hose retainer to actually get it to separate. But this, if you push on it, push it down, hopefully you can see that. Maybe if I move it over here, this might be a better angle. So push that, it's going to help separate it, and then just wiggle it out. And sometimes this little plastic piece here will come off, so you don't want to lose that. That just slides back on, and that's going to help you if you have to take it off again. You know, I'm going to actually leave it off so it doesn't fall and get lost. You do have a little O-ring on here for sealing purposes, so you could check that if you do have a leak. That would show up on the smoke test as well, and that's that bottom connector right there. And then I also have to separate this back side here that goes down under the intake manifold. To aid in you seeing what's going on, and to open it up a little bit more, you can also disconnect the power steering reservoir. That's a 13 millimeter. There's just 2 bolts holding this down. Here and here. That releases the reservoir. I can actually pull this out of the way. Sometimes this hose can be a little difficult to remove, so if you use some white lithium grease, I like to use a cotter pin tool that has like a little bit of a hook without a sharp end, kind of work your way in there with the grease on the end. Or, you know, hopefully if you grab the bottom of the hose and twist it, and you can work it off that way as well. Now, you don't want to pull the whole thing like you're just going to yank it out, because you will pull it off the bottom of the intake manifold. There we go. And there's my vent valve. I'm going to check for power to my vent valve to make sure it is my vent valve causing the problem. I have to turn my key on, or you won't see any voltage. You need pin 1, which if you look at the top of the connector here where the spring retainer is, pin 1 is to your right. So this is pin 1, this is pin 2. I'm going to use a little jumper wire, make sure the other side isn't touching ground. I got my orange and yellow. I'm going to go ahead and just put probe into that one right there. And I'm going to go from power and just use the ground up here. And I get 12 volts, 11.81. Alright, good voltage. Will it light a test light? That's another test you can do. So take this out. Use a test light instead. Just be careful not to put too much pressure into that connector. And it does light a test light, so that's a good circuit right there. Now if you did not have power, we have to go to the E-box, which in this vehicle is fuse 2. So the E-box is up in here. I'm going to go ahead and remove the cover and check fuse 2 and show you how to access fuse 2. Okay, 5mm Allen. Don't have to take these all the way out, just almost all the way. Lift it up. Okay, fuse 2 is going to be in that fuse carrier, which is in that black box right over here. Again, you have to check these with the key on. Just going to use a test light. We're just going to check each one. It's usually a good idea while you're here. You can actually access the side of the fuse. Good. Good. This is fuse 2. So obviously I was getting power, so I wouldn't have needed to check here. If you are not getting power, actually I think that last fuse is an extra fuse. It's not even powered, if my memory serves me here. But I have seen this second fuse, a 30 amp fuse right here, fail. Usually it's from a bad vent valve, but it could also be from another component that's on that leg to the vent valve, because that fuse does feed other components as well. So you have to keep that in mind if you do have a blown fuse. Now if you do have a fuse that's opened, you need to separate the tab on the side, pull this cover off, and if you check out my video for the E-box, I go over how to open up this connector, because this has a slider on top, and those fuses can be a little difficult to access. But I do go over that in a different video. That's going to be covered in my video for an E46 electronic box that I've just recently posted, the one right before this video. Now that connector I need is number 3, so 1, 2, and 3. If I wanted to check my wire, the activation side, I would have to disconnect it there, press down on the tab and slide this one out, that's 2, and access number 3, which is the third one in right here. So it's going to be this module connector here. You can actually slide these out. They have just a retainer tab. You can slide these out. Don't mix them up. I actually ran into that once with a car that came in with a no start after it was at another shop, and they had mixed up these two connectors. What's nice is that these connectors are numbered. So if you can see that, you can actually see the numbers towards the bottom over here. And 40 is here, 40, 41, 42. And I believe that was pin 42 that we need to check. So I'm going to ohm out from here at pin 42, here at pin 42, over to my connector at the purge valve to check this wire. I'm going to use my airbag test harness that I like to use. Let's say the part number for that is 9118086. And I'm going to go to pin 42. So 40, 41, 42. And that slides right in. And I'm going to go to the other side. Well, interestingly enough, it looks like my vehicle actually has an open somewhere in the wire between the DME and the vent valve. And You know, I haven't resolved all of the issues with this car yet with the check engine light. I don't remember if I saw a vent valve fault, but checking continuity, obviously you want to use ohms, which I have right here, and if you use the tone selection, it'll actually make an annoying noise when you have good continuity. And I have my pin set up on pin 2 here and pin 42 in the engine computer. And this is just checking continuity, and when I check it here to here, it's open. So I can check it from here to a ground, so I don't have a short to ground. I can check the other side from here to ground. I don't have a short to ground. It looks like I have an open on the activation side. So I'm going to have to trace this down and check that wire, which the wire actually goes from here, goes into this harness, comes out here, and goes down to this little box holder down here. And I can partially open up this harness. I can figure out which wire is from here to here. Sometimes if you actually try to pull the wire out, you can find where your short is as well, because it'll be separated and the wire will just come out. I could take apart this connector a little bit down here, and I'll have to try to see what's going on. Let's do some quick troubleshooting while I'm here and just see. It should be, according to my wiring diagram up there, should have been a brown wire. This connector actually is just clipped into this housing right here, so you can actually, let's see if I can get a close-up of that. You can actually just separate that. It's just held on by like a clip, so just squeeze it a little bit and that'll pull that connector side out. And let's see, I have a red, yellow, red, white with a yellow tracer, and I have a brown and a blue wire. Now my wiring diagram said this should be a brown wire, so I think my wiring diagram might actually be wrong, even though I got it right off of the BMW wiring diagrams. Alright, I'm going to take a look at this same DME connector. I'm going to slide this out. This is that little clip I told you about right here. Just push that aside and you can slide that little connector module right out. And let me just take a look. This is the wire I thought it was right here, according to the diagram. It's a brown wire, which should be right by my diagram, but since I have a brown and blue there, you know what? I have a brown and blue right here. I don't see any other brown and blues. Yep, there is actually another brown and blue on the other side, but you know what? On a whim, let me check this one right here. That's going to be, let's see, 52, 51, 50, pin 49. Alright, so I'm still in the same spot there. You know, what's great about this is that this is more real life right here than anything. You can't necessarily 100% trust the wiring diagram. So let me see if this is it right here. I don't have to figure out why. Let me check to see if there's a different wiring diagram for my vehicle. Does it make a difference, automatic versus manual? Let's see. Yep, here it is. So I got 1.7, 1.8 ohms. So actually I do not have an open wire. My diagram is wrong. And just a little bit of basic troubleshooting. Double check your wire colors according to my diagram up here. For M62, which I don't have, for M54. Maybe it's different for the M52 TU. This is my diagram that I was looking at. And let's see if you can get in so you can see that. That's my DME connector right there. And pin 42 and a brown wire. But on my vehicle it's brown and blue wire, and it's actually pin 49. So what I found was there's actually 5 different wiring diagrams that I could have had from my vehicle, and I did figure out a good way to tell which diagram is which, and it comes down to the color wire that goes to the DME. Now, like on this diagram, it's fuse 2 to the vent valve to the DME, and you can see right here BR, that means it's a brown wire. So that's pin 21 at that connector. And then if you have that brown wire coming off of the purge valve, like I showed you how to check, it could also be same thing, fuse 2, 1 and 2, it could be pin 42. So with the brown wire, it's either going to be pin 21 or pin 42 at the DME. Now, if you have a red and violet wire coming off of your purge valve, you're going to want to check pin 21, and that's fuse 1. So if you have the red and violet, fuse 1, pin 21. And for this one, if you have just the red wire, it's going to be pin 23, and the fuse is actually going to be fuse 3. Now on my vehicle, this is the wiring diagram that I would have, and this is all shows up for the same car. So that's why you can have a little bit of confusion here. I had the red and white wire, which is pin 44 at the DME, and actually doesn't show me my fuse here, but I believe it was fuse 2. So the good way to check this would be to go by the color of the wire at the purge valve. Will help you determine where to go at your engine computer. Well, now that I know I have good continuity, I'm going to go ahead and button this part at least back up. So I don't think I have a problem with my vent valve. I don't remember there being a code for that. Go ahead and put these connectors together. Leave my E-box open for now since I'm inside the garage. Wouldn't recommend that if you have your vehicle outside, because water will get into that E-box. And I can come back down here to my purge valve. Take my test wire out. I can just clip this back into place. Take my purge valve. You know, in most cases you're not going to have a wiring issue, so you can check your power and ground. I like to take a little bit of white lithium grease and put it on the connector. For the hose, it just makes everything go together a little bit easier. And I want to do this back one first. Can't really mix these up because of the size. The hoses are different. I'm going to slide that on. You saw how nice and easy that went. And I'm going to just pop that into place. Right up here. I have this bottom hose. I want to remember my clip. My release clip. Put that back on. And just go with an audible click. That's already back on, good to go. Remember to plug the purge valve back in. Take my power steering reservoir. Get my test light out of the way here. That was pretty interesting because on all the other diagrams it had that pin 42. Very curious why it was different for my vehicle. Let's see this different wiring diagram. But as you can see, a little bit of quick basic troubleshooting and check wire color. And you know, I was in the right module. It is that same one up there at the DME. A little bit of butyl tape that onto my bolt, sticks it to the socket, and it won't fall off. And that's how I can get that back one for the reservoir without losing that bolt. You can do the same thing with a little bit of electrical tape around the bolt because it makes it just a little bit more snug on the socket. Tighten that up. So this should be installation of your replacement purge valve, and then you'd have to clear the code. And after a refuel, or if your carbon canister is already full, it will run the test with your engine running. Usually you can hear that clicking at idle when that purge valve is activating, so you can listen for the clicking. Install my airbox. I had just separated it right at the mass air. Right at the end of the video, I'll take another look at that wiring diagram and see if I can find something that corresponds better with my vehicle. Pretty good, because like I was saying, that's realistically that's more real life. Just like dropping a socket. Let's back off real quick. Get my socket. Got your two 10 mil for the airbox. And then the snorkel. And then just the clips for right here. And it's all done. So just to recap, a vent valve, I have seen them fail. They can actually even cause a leak, fault the set if the vent valve is sticking open. It's actually really common on BMW E93 series to come in with a vent valve that's failed. And I've seen it where technicians replace a vent valve and the car comes back, the vent valve is sticking again. That's because they did not check the charcoal canister, and the charcoal canister is actually breaking down internally, putting small little flakes of material that work their way up the line and actually are causing the vent valve to stick just a tiny bit and end up with like a micro leak, which sets a check engine light. So what I've been doing on all of those, having my technicians check the charcoal canister for those white flakes if you do find it, and you can always check yours too. You need to replace the charcoal canister, you need to replace all the lines all the way up to the vent valve and the vent valve itself, or else you'll end up with another repeat problem. I've also seen that on Mini Coopers as well, so it's not an overly common problem, but I've seen quite a few in the scheme of things where, you know, either it's a vent valve, and if you don't check the carbon canister, you're taking the risk of having another problem, having to replace a vent valve a second time.